Here. Let's see here. So yeah, we're going to look a little bit about the doctrine of humanity tonight. I mean, I've done some things on this, but I'm going to take this somewhat in a little different direction, and not totally, but a little bit here and there. So the first thing we want to remember is that, like I think I've shared this quote before by Nancy Pearcey, who is a Christian professor and apologist. She teaches at Houston Christian University. She's written some really good books. I think I met her about 5 or 6 years ago at a conference. But anyway, she has a book called Total Truth. And she wrote this a ways back, but her concern was that, that professing Christians don't view their faith as a worldview. We view it just as simply a relationship with Jesus, and that's it. Of course, it is a relationship with Jesus, but she was concerned that we don't let our worldview speak to the entire view of reality. And so when she wrote Total Truth, she wanted to say that Christianity we need to view it as speaking to the all of reality, like the whole of reality, like it speaks to every area of reality. It's not just, about me and Jesus, and then I die and I go to heaven, and that's it. Beg the issues we look around the world, whether it be, it speaks into politics, it speaks into big ethical issues, it speaks into the way we view people, it speaks into the way we make decisions, it speaks into everything. So that was what she was concerned about in her book, and that's why she wrote that book. So if you really want to get into it, get that book. But anyways, so as we talk about tonight about a little bit the doctrine of humanity, I want to mention Blaise Pascal. Well, I see his face is not popping up. Just a second here. I'm going to have to see some here. It's not PowerPoint I wanted. See if I can find the other one. Let's try this one. Hopefully this one will be better. Not that if you don't see his face, it's terrible, because it's not like the end of the world. Nope, still can't see it there. I don't know why his face is not showing. Anyway, well, if you're not familiar with Pascal, he was a brilliant guy, and he was a mathematician. If you notice, my points are way on the right because his face on the left. His face is not showing. I have no idea why. It was showing earlier, it just suddenly isn't showing anymore. But anyways, he was a French mathematician and a scientist, inventor, and he made some major contributions to mathematics and the physical sciences. He was one of the key scientists as far as like in the medieval, someone that really made a big contribution, as a Christian. He developed a digital calculator to aid in commerce, that could handle the French monetary units, which are not base 10. He also invented the syringe and the hydraulic press. So as you can see, he was a big deal. He was raised as a traditional Roman Catholic, but he was not really a follower of Jesus, not really born again, didn't have a relation with Jesus. And then what happened was he later in life, I believe right before he passed away, because he passed away very young in his 30s, right after not that far after he came to faith in Jesus, he came into contact with a Catholic splinter group named the Jansenists, and they basically were a splinter Catholic group, and they taught salvation was by grace and not by human merit. And so he had this conversion, which caused him to yield his life completely to Jesus. I mean, he had like a massive conversion or experience with God, and it certainly made that was it. So, excuse me one second. Let's try one last time here, see if this works. Nope, ain't gonna work. I don't know what the problem is. Okay, well, I just do it this way. Let's see if I can. No, it's not there either. Wait a minute, I know what to do. Give me 1 second here. Be patient with me. I have a solution to this because I planned for this. Let's try this one. This one comes up. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. Well, nope, ain't gonna work. I have no idea why it does that. Okay. So he had this massive conversion and he came to faith in Jesus. And so he started to write kind of like a book in a way, a giant, massive book on why he thought Christianity was true, but it never got fully published. And he basically in this book, it was called Pensis. You can actually read it. It wasn't really an official book. What it was is like someone after he died, his family they found his notes, and he had this massive amount of things he had compiled, but it just wasn't organized, and he didn't get it published. And so somebody came along, took that, and wrote, called it Thoughts or Reflections. I mean, it was his writings, but they had to organize it. And so in this massive work, he provided a lot of evidence for the Christian faith. He talked about how there's reasons to believe from the heart and reasons to believe from the mind. And you can read that. Like I said, you can get Pensis. You can, buy the book or probably read it online for free. But he basically became a Christian apologist. And he gave several reasons. He talked about prophecy, he talked about the evidence for Jesus, talked about all kinds of things. But he obviously had a huge influence on science, and because he had made these major discoveries, as you can see. And as a mathematician, like I said, he developed the digital calculator, he invented the syringe and the hydraulic press. So, he was someone that had quite an impact. But the Lord decided to take him home early. I can't remember what he died from, but he died in his 30s. And like I said, he came to faith later on in his early 30s. So, but the one thing he pointed out was that any worldview has to be able to explain what we call the paradoxical nature of the human condition. Okay. And what that means is that Pascal saw this paradox. Okay. He looked at humanity just through observation, not necessarily even opening the Bible, but just looking at humanity. And he noticed that humanity exhibited qualities of both greatness and wretchedness. Okay. That humans had tremendous potential for great things and they could do incredible things, but they're also wretched in the need of spiritual liberation, it seems. So, it seems like there's some sort of paradox. Is it a contradiction? Is there two things there in tension? It seems like humans have this amazing potential for greatness, or are they just wretched human beings in need of spiritual liberation? Which is it? Or is it both? And so that was something he said, that whatever you believe, whatever your worldview is, you have to answer this paradox about human beings, that we have this, we can observe this in humans. Of course, many humans strive for greatness. We have all kinds of books on how to do, people want to make their lives count and how to have an impact and do great things. And of course, the word great and greatness is kind of subjective. It varies from person to person what greatness is, right? But we do certainly see humans and humanity striving for that. And then, of course, we observe that humanity is going the opposite direction, where we do just the most atrocious things. And so he said, something needs to explain this paradox. Whatever your worldview is has to explain this. So he says here in his own words, he says, man's greatness and wretchedness are so evident that the true religion must necessarily teach us that there is in man some great principle of greatness and some principle of wretchedness. Okay. So he's saying, whatever, we have to find the true religion that explains this, the true worldview that explains this paradox in humanity. Okay. And so what he said was, though, that you don't have to necessarily right away, you don't have to turn to the Bible to get the answer. What he says is you first start from observation. And that's what we mean when we view things empirically, because we all use our five senses every day. We do empirical observation all the time. We do it all day long, where we observe something or we observe a certain data about something, then we try to come up with the explanation for that. If I walk out in my backyard right now and I see, a couple hawks in my backyard sitting there walking around, I probably would then try to come up with an explanation. I'd say to my wife or family, why are there two or three giant hawks walking in our backyard, walking around? They're never in our backyard. This is so uncommon. Well, I could probably come up with an explanation. Maybe there's something dead around there, right? Something like a dead animal or something. Most hawks like to come and pick at dead animals, right? Or pull them apart and take them apart and fly away, whatever. So that's something I could come up with, right? As an observation, maybe come up with an explanation for why we're observing these hawks in our backyard. So that's what Pascal's doing. He's observing humanity, and he said, we got to come up with an explanation for what we're observing. Now, what he does is he has this thing, it's called the anthropological argument. Anthropology is a study of humans, right? But he's basically, his anthropological argument, it doesn't start with an argument for the existence of God. It just starts, like I said, with the observation of human nature, just observing humans. That's all he does, just to repeat again, okay? And so what happens is, it's obvious that when you look around the history of mankind, that we are just absolutely capable of doing the most atrocious things that you can't even, the things you sit and you go, how can anyone do that? What is wrong with humanity? How is that possible? I mean, the inhumane behavior of humans, that just the lack of, the evil. And so, we've had, of course, more than enough genocides in the history of mankind. So many genocides, I can't even put them on all the slides. Mistreatment of humans all across civilizations and worlds. I mean, all across our civilization and world. We've had, all I like to do is turn on the news every day. If you even watch it or just look online, it's just, there's one evil after another evil, of humans mistreating humans the way we treat people. It's just everywhere. Killings, rapes, stabbings, genocide, murder, slavery, whatever it is, human trafficking. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, I think we all know that 9/11, as most people remember the day where they are, because it's a high impact event, we were watching that take place and we're saying, something very wrong with that. Something is very, very evil about what I'm seeing right now, right? So humans can, just more, the more you even look, sadly, of course, we know the news just reports all the evil stuff and they like to sell, it's sensationalistic, but it's really depressing because it really shows how, some of the things humanity is capable of doing. But, people have also what Pascal also observed is that humans are capable of doing great things. Now, it is true that people define greatness in different ways. It's kind of subjective, as I said. I mean, these are some of the quotes I've seen, and whatever some person might say, you achieve greatness this way or that way. Like Anne Frank says, it's not in what you accumulate; it's in character and goodness. That's greatness. That's. Other people define it as making a major contribution to humanity or coming up with something to prolong life or helping a certain people group or, inventing something or sports achievements, whatever. Everybody's got different definitions of greatness, but um, it's obviously humans can do some incredible things, but we also can do some absolutely atrocious things. And so that's what Pascal was saying that every worldview needs to explain. He also said, um, he really observed, he had this great observation that people try to ignore their condition. We talk about the human condition. What is wrong with with humans? What is the human condition? And he said that when people try to slow down for just a minute and think about it, they then get really busy and there's diversions. He talks about the reasons why they ignore it. They just like to stay really busy. There's a lot of diversion, a lot of distraction. Um, whatever you want to do, I just got to keep going, 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 and keep staying busy, busy, busy. And today, of course, that's amplified by the use of technology with the cell phones, social media. I mean, you can be entertained 24 hours a day. You can just be distracted 24 hours a day. So to slow down and think about your about what is, who you are and like what is wrong with humans, obviously, and what is our condition. Um, a lot of people just don't want to deal with it. So they just stay super busy. And there's certainly been more than enough worldviews that have tried to explain this paradox, like what is wrong with humans and why are we so evil, but yet why do we have the potential to do great things? And there's been all kinds of ways to explain this. Children and college students are taught, that we're just obviously one view is we're just a result of chance evolution, that we're an accident of nature. And then you bring psychology into it, and psychology tries to explain it that you need to figure yourself out. Sometimes we explain it by, talking about self-esteem, the humans have potential, ultimate potential, and we're always creatures of unlimited potential. Psychology talks about that. And then we have sociology that says, well, the problem with humans is the fact that, we're just a victim of where we're located and our sociological factors. And then genetics is another one, just genetics. There's all kinds of ways people try to explain the paradox, right? And then we've had many kinds of spiritualities, Platonism, Gnosticism, pantheism, New Age humanism. These things all are ways for people to construct ways to explain humanity. What is humanity? What is our potential, and why are we so bad? And then you have, of course, the worldviews that have the view that humans are nothing more than a glob of matter. Like animalism. Things that ignore the spiritual nature of humanity, like Marxism, behaviorism, atheism, Darwinism, Freudianism, Freudianism. Um, so it's no doubt it's been plenty of philosophies and plenty of worldviews taught to try to explain this paradox. The question is, do any of them do a good job with it, and do they really get to the heart of the problem? And so there's also, I want to mention, there's also humanism, secular humanism, where that basically says that humans are it. We're all there is. We're all that will ever be. There's nothing beyond us, nothing transcendent. And there's a whole humanistic manifesto you can read online that they believe, of course, that humanity has the power and potential to achieve greatness. We are alone responsible for what happens in the world. There's no God. He doesn't help us. We don't need God. We are everything. And through technology and through advancements in technology, we'll be able to reach the potential that we need to be at, right? And so that's what they believe. And, that's why many people have that worldview, want to build a utopia. I think we can just do it ourselves. We'll bring a revolution. We'll get rid of all the institutions that are holding us back. We'll riot. We'll protest. We'll tear them down, and we will build our own utopia because humans are the center of everything. Plenty of that going on today. So you can read about that in the humanistic manifestos online. So, is it right, or is it feasible for us, or just to look for other things to explain that paradox? Can we blame it on genetics, upbringing, psychology, or something else? Now, certainly some of those things play a role, but there needs to be is there a better explanation? That's what Pascal was talking about. And so what he observed was that humans crave for greatness but are unable to achieve it. And what happens in that, they exasperate their misery by the very idea of greatness, which they cannot rid themselves. So he says, what Pascal says is, what other explanation other than Christian anthropology can explain this? The humans were created for greatness, or the greatness we're created for is we're created by God, and we're created for a relationship with God. That's what greatness is having a relationship with God and following his commands. And then what explains, not only that they were created for relation to God, but also that we've fallen into the misery because of our sin. And so Pascal basically, like I said, he didn't try to start with the Bible to prove this point. He started with observation. And, we don't need the Bible, as I said, to see that the doctrine of original sin is empirically verifiable throughout history, across civilizations, our own personal experience. There's something incredibly wrong with humanity. But we also empirically observe, right? We also empirically can verify that humans can do morally upright things and are capable of greatness, right? They can do, there's both are seen in the world around us. There's all kinds of humans that lay down their lives, they're heroes, they firefighters, people in the military, policemen, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to list of people that do sacrificial things. There's people, these same people could obviously do bad things. I'm just saying there's all kinds of examples. People can do morally upright things, people that, rise to the occasion and save other people's lives, or they do something incredibly morally upright. So what basically Pascal was saying is that his anthropological argument appeals to what's called the best explanation regarding the human condition. And so what is the best explanation? The best explanation is that basically Christianity is the best explanation, okay? And so when you're talking to people, they're trying to figure out this world, there's always good questions you can ask them, like, you ever look at humans, and notice there's something really wrong with us? Do you ever watch the news at all? I mean, maybe you don't, but do you pay attention to why humans can do great things, but they can do the most awful and atrocious things? The Bible explains that. It's got the best explanation of anything other than anything else to explain that. And of course, in the Bible, we, as Pascal noted, we're made in God's image. And we, of course, have a couple passages that talk about that, and it's repeated. You have the Genesis 1:26-27 passage about God making mankind in our image, in his likeness, right, and giving us dominion over everything. And then he repeats it in Genesis 5:1-3. The male and female are created. He made him in the likeness of God. So that's repeated twice in Genesis 1, Genesis 5, and then in Genesis 9, God, says, "Whoever sheds the blood of a human, by human shall a person's blood be shed, for in his image God made humankind." So he repeats it again in Genesis 9. So there's three main passages in Genesis that God made us in his image. Now, Pascal knew this, And the image of God as a phrase is only applied to humans, right? We are the pinnacle of God's creation. We are distinguished from the rest of creation. So, yes, we are seen differently than animals, of course. I know some people treat animals just as valuable as humans. In some cases, people treat a human absolutely no different than a human. I once had to drop my dog off to a boarding place, and I noticed that people could purchase certain rooms for hundreds and hundreds of dollars where the dog could sit in there on a couch and watch TV during the day. The TV was on all day. He could just sit in a specific room by himself instead, generally with a cage with other dogs or his own cage. So anyway, um, so humanity in some way, we are in some way like God. The copy is like the original creator. Now, we are not God, but we know we're created in his image. Now, there's been a lot of debate over the years what that means to be created in God's image. Is the image, we know God, doesn't have a body, and people are like, well, I have a body, must mean God has a body. That's what that means. That's not what that means. Or is the image of God, something we are? Is it something we have? What is it? So there's always been some different models proposed to explain what it means to be created in the image of God. I'll talk about a few of these, and then I would say all of these views have some merit. You don't have to necessarily pit them all against each other and be like, well, that's the right one, the other one's wrong, and that settles that. We could say that all these have some wisdom and have some truth, right? The substantive view is that it says the image of God is a characteristic within the makeup of man. Substantive view. And this basically says that being the image of God means that humans share, not perfectly, we share in the nature of God, that we're given certain attributes of intelligence, knowledge, spiritual understanding, creativity, wisdom, love, compassion, morality, holiness, justice. And those things are all part of God's attributes, or who he is. And so we share in that and we reflect that to other people. Humans can see that in each other. We all display these things, some better than others. But certainly that is one view of what it means to be made in the image of God. Some people say, oh, God is intelligent, he's rational, humans are rational, intelligent, or God is creative. Humans seem to display tremendous creativity. We can create things, create all kinds of things, design things. Artists, there's all kinds of ways we show our creativity, love, compassion, holiness, those things, mercy, those morality, things like that. So that's one way to view it. And then another view, well, also to build on that, being created in the image of God means God is a personal God. And when we think of something, a personal being means that being is endowed with rationality, self-consciousness, and volition. The volition is their will. And those things are seen in all of humanity. And so, people would say, yeah, God is rational, he's conscious, and he has a will. Humans have rationality, we're conscious, we have consciousness and we have a volitional will. We exercise our will every day. So, we're not determined. It's not like we can't make choices, right? God makes choices, we make choices. So maybe that's part of what it means to be made in the image of God, or a personal God. And then there's another view that discusses what it means to be created in the image of God. It's called the relational view. And that means that because God is relational and he is triune, meaning that the Father, Son, the Spirit have always been together before we were created in eternity, there's a perfect, loving relationship between the three of them. They enjoy perfect communion. They're not arguing with each other and debating each other. Perhaps, what that means to create an image of God is we have a relational element. We need to relate to other humans. We flourish in relationships. We flourish in community. And that exemplifies the fact that we're made in the image of God, because God's a relational God. and we are relational beings. I mean, some people I'm sure I know some people don't like other relationships and maybe they isolate themselves, but I think they've shown quite evidentially speaking, that humans flourish when we are related to other humans and we are in community and we have those relationships. Or finally, maybe there's another view that says what it means to create an image and likeness of God as a rulership view, meaning that when God uses the term for rule, or the author uses the term for rule in Genesis to have dominion or rule, it means that God charged us, enabled us to rule and subdue the earth. So we have like a function as like a as God, we function as a representative of God. We have a function to fulfill. So God gives us this job in a way to subdue the earth. We don't do that through force or anything, but it's like a rulership view. So that's more of like a functional view. So all these views have some truth to them. You don't have to pit them against each other. So I just want to mention some of them. But one thing I do want to say is, though, even though humans are depraved and we see the depravity of man all throughout humanity, that doesn't mean that we are wholly bad in everything. We still bear the image of God. We still are his image bearers. We didn't lose that status when the fall happened to humanity. Because you notice I mentioned in Genesis 5 and 9, after the fall, they were still viewed as image bearers of God. Humanity is still image bearers of God. So it's not like we lost it and we have to get it back. Now, it's true through Jesus, we're being conformed to his image and we're being restored to the image of God every day. But that doesn't mean we lost that designation as soon as Adam fell and the fall of the garden happened. Okay, we can still do some good things. We're not totally, gone completely. I mean, yes, we do a lot of horrible things, but we need to understand that, we say total depravity. It does mean the sin certainly impacts the whole person, certainly impacts every part of us. But it doesn't mean that man is without a conscience or any sense of right and wrong anymore. And it doesn't mean that, humans cannot conform outwardly to the law of God, but it does mean that humans cannot save themselves. They cannot save themselves. Okay? Now, you notice I already mentioned that. Never mind. So, like I said, it is true that the impact of sin is that, our intellects, our emotions, our desires, our hearts, our decision-making process, goals, and motives, and physical bodies are all impacted by the fall of man. No doubt about it. We think of the contrast between sin and shalom. Shalom, which is a Hebrew word that means peace, harmony, wholeness, completeness, prosperity, which happens between humans, happens between us and God. It's supposed to happen between nations, which we don't see a lot of these days. But because of the fall of man, we see the lack of shalom. We see relationships, relationship with ourselves is one of shame and regret. Relationships with others is damaged sometimes because of blame and argument. And our relationship with God has changed from intimacy to alienation. So there's no doubt that the fall of man had an impact, had a major impact on all of humanity. We can observe that empirically. Now, if you want to go deeper on, I'm not going to get into all these things about original, I did another teaching original sin. It's on my YouTube channel. But if you want to go deeper on that and the different views on that in theological circles, you can get some of these books. I don't know, they're helpful if you're interested in that topic. So just want to mention that. Now, like I said, your worldview needs to explain what's wrong with humanity and how do we explain the human condition. Okay. So whoever's out there, you're talking to conversationally, you can always bring up, these issues. What is it about humanity? What is the paradox we see? Why are we so able to do incredible things and able to do the most atrocious and evil things? How does that work? As we always like to ask college students, are you a good person? And what they have to do before they can answer the question, they have to define the good. What do you mean by good? Where's it come from? What's your standard of goodness? Most people are concerned about being good. Seems to bother people. Yeah, I think I'm a good person. Yeah, I think about this. Yeah, I'm a good person. I ask them why. Why do you say yes? Because I try to help people. I try to be respectful. I try to treat others I would want to be treated. And so that's always a good conversation piece to get into. Now, humans, though, the fact, even though we're severed because of the fall of man, like I said, even though we have that moral depravity, it doesn't mean that we can't do what is right. Because as I said, Paul talks about in Romans 2, he says in Romans 2, verses 12 to 16, he says, Gentiles who do not have the written law, that means the Torah, by nature do what the law requires. They are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the work of the law is written in their hearts. And so God has placed the moral law in all of the Gentile nations. Jews have it too, but Jews, of course, have more. They have the written law. And we have the moral law written in our hearts, so we have an internal sense of right and wrong. We should have some sort of idea there's a standard in the world around us that when it's violated, it should bother us, right? And so that's why when C.S. Lewis wrote his book, The Abolition of Man, that he noticed when he observed all cultures that they all show evidence of the moral law that Paul speaks about. All these different cultures shows things that they had similarities. They had, moral codes as far as special benevolence or duties to parents, elders, and ancestors, justice, issues of justice, duties to children and posterity, good faith and veracity, being truthful, law of mercy. So there's a lot of common moral themes in all cultures that Lewis observed. And he said, it seems that the moral law that God gave to the world is manifested in all these different cultures in some way. It's written in our hearts. Okay. So humans can still do some good things. They can still do moral things, right? It doesn't mean they can save themselves, but they still can do some moral things. Now, so what, as I said, that Pascal was saying is that the best explanation for this paradox humanity is Christian theism, that Christianity is a better explanation of what we can empirically observe about humans throughout history. And also Christianity has a solution to the issue. Of course, that's the gospel. Okay, we have an answer. How do we redeem that issue with humans? We have the gospel. Okay, now, there's another thing that, so we're talking about how the Bible explains certain aspects of reality better than others, but better than other worldviews, more adequately, is a stronger explanation, better explanation, more thorough explanation. There's also something that we've noticed in the world around us is that humans really seem to care about fighting for other people, or fighting for each other, fighting for rights and value and dignity. And that is something that it's gone on for quite some time. But we notice that a lot of these human rights groups that are around us every day on college campuses fighting for Palestinian rights, this rights, that women's rights, women's right to abortion, just the list goes on of all kinds of groups that fight for rights. Okay. And they fight for humans. If they're being treated unfairly, humans got to speak up and do something about it. And so most people live as if people really do matter. Okay. And then once again, the question is, why is that? Why do we act every day like people really do matter? As the shirt goes, which I still have to get made, I have this as a design on a shirt. I'm gonna wear it around. Why does anyone matter? Um, we sure do act like people matter, but I want to know why anyone matters. As one atheist girl came up to me on campus one day, she said, do you support Black Lives Matter? And my response was, well, wait, you're an atheist? And she said, yes. And I said, well, why does anyone matter? She said, that's a good question. So, that is a good question. Okay. Why are you fighting so hard for specific people group? What's your view of humans? If you're an atheist, I don't know. That's going to create some challenges there. So we need to understand that on these opposing sides and disagreements, there's common ground. The theme is that that people seem to matter, not to be treated a certain way. We seem to think humans have dignity, value, and rights, and these things should be respected among all humans. Okay, it's just everywhere. It's just everywhere I go. I mean, I look, whether it's in the news or whether it's on college campuses or whether it's somewhere, there's certain people groups that are advocating for other people. They're advocates. They march and they do marches. They do social media. They do all kinds of events to raise awareness about the need to fight for this people group or that people group. It's everywhere, right? And the way we view this impacts all the ethical issues of our day. It impacts the sanctity of life, the rights and that issue, the rights and value, dignity of humans and immigration and the homosexuality, same-sex relations, the transgenderism issue, the human trafficking issue, racial discrimination, hate speech, genetic engineering, prostitution, drugs, life imprisonment, the use of lie detectors, hunger strikes, everything. All these things have to do with humans making moral choices, and it has to do with the way we view humans. Okay. Now, you also see people really think people matter because they're going to vote a certain way, because whoever you vote for is going to pass policies. I should say, not that president per se, but there will be bills that come up in Congress that, of course, he's involved. But the point is that there will be certain things that will come up, certain policies that will impact specific people or people groups. So, we generally we pick a certain candidate that we think is going to help our neighbor, right? Or hurt our neighbor, right? It may be hurting our neighbor, helping our neighbor. I think transgender ideology is hurting a lot of people. But, there's certain policies that are going to keep going through to fight for those rights for people to mutilate their bodies and for children to go ahead and change genders at age 14 without the parents knowing. That's going to go on, sadly, until transgender clinics are shut down, like some of them are happening in England. But that's just bad policy. But those policies are always out there and being passed. Or, you pick a career that you think will help or benefit people, right? Or you don't want people to abuse or mistreat you because you think you have dignity and value. Or, if you ever ask somebody what's your purpose in life, many people say help people or want to make the world a better place because they think people matter. Now, I realize you may think this is very basic and redundant, like, well, of course people matter. That's what people say when I say, why do people matter? Well, we just do. Well, that's not an answer. That's circular. You're being circular with the argument. I want to know why you think people matter. Okay. Why do you look at that picture and say, well, that's not the way to treat people? What is it about humans that make them important or make them, why do they have value and dignity and worth? Why is that wrong? Your moral and ethical system will be related to this because your moral or ethical system has three components. You have moral values, the things that matter to you, your values such as love, justice, mercy. Those are the things that motivate your behavior. And then you have moral duties. Those are your obligations, things you ought to do, things you ought not to do. that flows from your moral values. And of course, you have moral accountability, hopefully. But the way you view people is intertwined with your entire ethical system. Okay. And what happened was that when you look at after World War II with Germany and what they did to the Jews, we saw the United Nations issued a Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, which says all human beings are born equal in dignity. And where'd they get that from? So, and then in 1966, this document plus two other documents, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, became known as the International Bill of Rights. All three documents maintain that various human rights have their grounding in the dignity of all humans. Then we had more of these pop up in a lot of countries. We had the African Charter on Human and People's Rights by the Organization for African Unity, calls dignity an essential objective for the achievement of legitimate aspirations of African peoples. We had the Arab Charter of Human Rights by the League of Arab States, acknowledging both the belief in human dignity and a right to life of dignity. And we had South Africa's constitution that states everyone has inherent dignity and the right to have their dignity respected and protected. The dignity of humanity shall be inviolable. We had the Supreme Court of Canada and Israeli Supreme Court affirm human dignity to be a constitutionally grounded fundamental value. And then even when Obama got his Nobel Peace Prize, he said only a just peace based on inherent rights and dignity of every human individual can be truly lasting. So we see this big push for human rights, human dignity, human value in all people groups. And, like I said, you can always ask people why you care so much about the rights and quality of others. What is your worldview? What are humans? How do we get here? Are we made in the image and likeness of God, or are we just accidents of nature? What are we? What makes humans important? Why do you fight so hard for them? Why are you so morally obligated to fight for equality, fairness, and justice? Where does our idea of justice, fairness, equality come from? Okay, these are questions that you can bring up with people. Now, I know you're saying, well, they're just not that deep. People don't think about this. Well, you're a Christian, you think deep, and go ahead and bring it up. Don't worry about how they respond. Just try it. Now, I just want to mention that when it comes to human rights, there's generally three ingredients that are critical to validity of human rights. You have to have a universal morality. There has to be some sort of morality that transcends all cultures, all humans, something outside of ourselves to ground those things. And so they have to be true for everybody. Okay, everyone, or they're not human rights. So if you say like torture is wrong for all, or or torturing babies is wrong for all cultures, at all places, all times, that's a moral position that generally transcends all cultures. But there has to be a standard, a universal moral standard everybody appeals to outside themselves that transcends cultures. Okay, it's universal. The second ingredient, as I said, is human dignity, meaning that each person has worth. That's why certain kinds of actions can never be performed against them. Okay. And then there's a third ingredient, which was coined by a philosopher in his book Justice, which is called the Trump card. That's not Donald Trump. He just basically said that a person has a right to say their claim cannot be overridden by something else. So government cannot override a human right. Nothing can override a human right. Okay. So, when someone says, well, our laws are the basis for rights, that's not actually true. Human laws only recognize God-given rights. Okay. Because if human laws are the basis for your rights, then those laws can definitely go away tomorrow or next year. They can be written out of government. They can be changed right away. And if you have someone that, pushes hard to get rid of that right, well, then the right's gone. Okay. So that can't be the sole basis for human rights or our laws to get passed. Yes, laws have an impact, but there has to be something that transcends that. Um, a right, and just remember, a right is that which a person has a just claim to, a privilege that belongs to a person by law, nature, or custom. Okay. And your rights need to come from an outside source. They need to be grounded in an outside source. And that outside source has to be valid. Okay. If you don't have any way to ground, nothing outside yourself to ground the rights, it's just going to be based on human opinion. Okay. Like I say, without God, human rights are just no more than subjective preferences. Okay. If God does not exist, then your claim that this people group has rights and that people group has rights can just be the opposite of what I say. I can just say, no, they don't. No, they don't. It's basically your subjective preference against my subjective preference, right? So, if people believe and fight for rights, such as abortion rights or same-sex marriage or whatever it is, they can't justify them as truly being rights if God does not exist. Now, this guy right here, I don't know if you know who he is. Yuval Noah Harari. He's an atheist, outspoken Jewish Israeli historian, futurist, popular author. He's part of the WEF, chief advisor to Klaus Schwab, founder and director of the influential WEF. He's interested in futurism and globalism and all kinds of things, but he is not any believer in God. And he has a huge influence on Israelis in Israel, on secular Israelis, on Israelis that don't believe in God. Because there is a Israeli population there. Some Israelis are secular. I mean, God's not part of their lives. Yes, there's the Orthodox wing of Jews there who do believe in God, but there's also a secular aspect of Israel that is just not, God is not part of their daily lives. They're culturally Jewish, but there's no relationship with God, no practicing of any really Judaism religiously. So Harari is a huge thinker and a big wig, on news channels and stuff, and he's just got a lot of influence. And he wrote a book called Sapiens: A Brief History of Mankind. And he says here, he has this quote that is really telling. I know it's long, but it's important. I want to read it. So he says here, according to the science of biology, people were not created. They have evolved. They certainly did not evolve to be equal. The idea of equality is inextricably intertwined with the idea of creation. The Americans got the idea of equality from Christianity, which argues that every person has a divinely created soul, that all souls are equal before God. However, if we do not believe in the Christian myths about God, creation, souls, what does it mean that all people are equal? Evolution is based on difference, not on equality. Every person carries a somewhat different genetic code and is exposed from birth to different environmental influences. This leads to development of different qualities that carry with them different chances of survival. Created equal should therefore be translated into evolved differently. Just as people were never created, neither according to the science of biology is there a creator who endows them with anything. There's only a blind evolutionary process devoid of any purpose, leading to the birth of individuals. Endowed by their creator should be translated simply into born. So you see his atheistic views coming out there in that quote. He seems to think the entire evolutionary picture is absolutely accurate. He's wrong, completely wrong. But people will read his book and eat it up and swallow it. But the thing is, though, notice how he says Americans got the idea of equality from Christianity. He admits that the view of human rights and equality and dignity comes from Christianity. As an atheist, he admits that. He doesn't agree with it, but he admits that's the foundation of everything. So that's kind of interesting. A lot of atheists say that. They'll say that, yes, Christianity is what gives us human rights and value and dignity, but it's just like a something we use just to help us, but it's not really true. But they admit that atheism can't ground it. Atheism can't ground any kind of human equality or rights or value or dignity. So that's kind of interesting. And so the question is, if God does not exist, what gives humans intrinsic? Intrinsic means that it's not based on their productivity or function. It's something that is endowed in them. It's given to them. Not it's something that is just endowed into humans based on our nature, who we are. That what is it that's written in us, that what is it that's in us that gives us that intrinsic value, dignity, and equal rights. It can't be based on just our function, what we can do, because a lot of people can't do all kinds of things, right? Certain people can do things better than others. Some people can't do anything, functionally speaking. Do we get to decide what, who matters and who doesn't? Is it based on human opinion? So back to the being made in the image of God, that has definitely grounded human rights, human dignity, human value for a long time. And of course, it means that all human beings, no matter what your background is, what your age is, your ethnicity, your gender, your abilities, you're endowed with dignity, rights, and value. Okay. And it's our responsibility to secure and protect those rights. But that's what actually government's supposed to do. As it says in the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. They're all endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And so the question is, is God the best explanation for this? He is, as a transcendent source, the source behind why all humans have equality, dignity, intrinsic value, why our value isn't based on usefulness or productivity, and why we are morally obligated to treat people as image bearers of God. So I think that explains reality a lot better than an atheistic worldview. So dignity doesn't vary according to our circumstances. It's a gift of God. It's endowed upon humans. Something God gives us through his grace. It's on all humans. We don't earn it. It's given to us the second we're created and brought into this world. So once again, to reiterate, having actual capacities, relationships, and functions, having those things, which we do, some of us have greater capacities than others, or functions, things we can do that others can't, just we're gifted in certain ways, but those flow from being made in the image of God, but it's not what defines it. Okay, no one's any less in God's image because they can do something differently than other humans. If they invent something that changes humanity, or they don't invent anything, doesn't make anything different in God's eyes. We're all created in his image. And so, unfortunately, like I said, the evolutionary view, like Harari has, says that human significance is grounded in evolutionary framework, their adaptability and survival, through humans being placed at the top of the evolutionary ladder, which could well be temporarily. And of course, there is no transcendent source for human dignity and value. Any attempt to say humans have dignity and value because of God are human creations. And human dignity is fluid and changes with culture and people. And, it just feeds right into what we call postmodern individualism and subjectivism, of course. So, and we are seeing a lot of that in our culture, no doubt. If you look at Stephen Hawking, what he said, he passed away. He said the human race is just a chemical scum on the moderate average-sized planet orbiting around a very average star in the outer suburb of one among 100 billion galaxies. We're so insignificant that I can't believe the whole universe exists for our benefit. That'd be like saying that you would disappear if I closed my eyes. Well, he's gone now. And while he made some major contributions to science, I guess he found out if he's just chemical scum. And remember, we are different from animals. I just said people don't think we are, but we have an inherent spiritual religious nature. I don't see animals having that. We alone can do logic. I mean, we can develop propositions, make arguments, write out an argument, premise 1, 2, and 3, um, do inferences. Um, we seem to be aware. We're also consciousness. Um, we seem to be, animals seem to be aware of a concrete reality, but they're not able to really do philosophy, among many other things. They can't carry out the branches of philosophy. They cannot um, do a lot of things humans can do. So to say we're just nothing more than humans or nothing more than animals is a bit reductionistic, and doesn't really give the whole picture. And then finally, also, let me say about collectivism, because collectivism is really pretty big in our world and culture, where basically your dignity and value is based on your collective group. Maybe say you have dignity and value because you're Jewish, African American, Hispanic, or German, whatever. So God creates many ethnicities, of course, in the Bible, many beautiful ethnicities, but it doesn't mean that's what we're supposed to get our first identity from, because obviously, throughout history, people have placed one ethnic group over the other, and people have been mistreated. So our first identity should be identify as being image bearers of God. That's our core identity. There's no races in the Bible. There's several ethnicities, one human race, many ethnicities, right? So we've seen what happens when people put all their eggs in the collectivism basket. Obviously, we still have that happening today in some places. So hopefully, if you're a Christian, you understand this and recognize this, that your first identity is an image bearer of God, a new creation in Christ. Your ethnicity matters, but it can't be your first identity. And so let me close with this quote from the book, Why People Matter, as the author says, "Only when human significance depends not on how great people are, on people's capacities, but how great God is, on God's capacities, can human significance truly be substantial and secure. Only when human significance is alien, rooted not in ourselves, but something outside ourselves, and human dignity inalienable and unshakable. In the end, then God is why people matter." So basically, Christianity is the best explanation for this. He says the best explanation for why humans can do incredible things and why they can do the most atrocious things. We can also say it's the best explanation for why people spend their entire lives fighting for what they consider to be inequality, justice, and human rights. Because most humans think humans have great value. Not all humans. Obviously, there's been plenty of genocides, and there's been a lot of people who don't think humans have any value. But there's still an awful lot of fighting going on for other humans for their equality, justice, and rights. So that'll be about it. And just remember, the Bible explains reality. It explains features of reality all around us. Okay, it's the best explanation. Christianity is the best explanation. I didn't say a perfect explanation, but it's a better explanation than the other alternatives that are out there.